Hi, I'm Diana Giselle Yanez, host of Highly Sensitive Money. I'm a money coach, certified financial planner, and a highly sensitive person who brings money and social justice together. If you're someone who feels deeply, can endlessly think through how one decision affects everything else, or has ever struggled with all the things that traditional financial thinking leaves out, you're in the right place. In this show, I chat with highly sensitive people on how they handle their money, and with money experts on how they cultivate social justice in their work. Questions? Please go to allthecolors.net and schedule a free 30-minute call. And I'm happy to share resources on investment management, money coaching, workshops, or anything else money and social justice related. Join us in this episode as we explore money and sensitivity while honoring that all of our well-being is interconnected. Today, I get to talk with Leo Aquino, a fellow financial coach, a writer, and the founder of Queer and Trans Wealth. We explore how money, identity, and social justice come together for queer and trans communities. Leo shares about growing up between financial extremes, moving from the Philippines to the US, and discovering their identity and voice. Throughout our conversation, Leo shares personal stories of growing up between two very different worlds in the Philippines, navigating immigration and poverty in the US, and confronting both privilege and scarcity as a queer trans person of color. Together, we reflect on workaholism as a legacy of survival, redefining what social justice looks like in everyday life, and how Leo's grandmother, Leonila, inspired a life of compassion, care, and really creating new worlds. We also unpack survivor's guilt, retirement for queer and trans elders, and the idea of right-sized accountability and justice work. This episode offers wisdom and warmth, as well as deep affirmation for anyone trying to make financial choices that align with who they are and the world they want to help create. Welcome, Leo Aquino, to Highly Sensitive Money. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly? Is it Aquino?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I'm so thank you so much for having me.
It's exciting to have you here. It was, as I shared before we started recording, it was exciting to listen to other conversations you've had, learn more about your view on money. But I would love for you to introduce yourself. What is the work that you do today, and how did you get to it?
Yeah. So my name is Leo Aquino. I use they, them, or he, him pronouns. I am a financial coach and the founder of Queer and Trans Wealth. So I provide coaching either on a one-on-one or group setting, or I also see couples. Money, financial coaching for, people who are, I actually find a lot of my clients are at a crossroads and they just need support making, bigger decisions and planning towards sort of living a life that's more in alignment with their values. Yeah. So for example, people who want to pay off debt, but also with the added challenge of maybe they want to leave their 9-to-5 in a couple of years, and that's kind of why they're orienting towards this financial wellness journey. Yeah. What else? I help people make savings plans for buying their first home, or saving up for having kids, or gender affirming surgeries, which very soon, I mean, knock wood, that things change, but right now, so many of our rights and access to healthcare are under attack. So yeah, it's just feeling a lot more urgent. Yeah. And how I got here, I'm really a writer and a journalist by trade. And for a couple of years, I was covering personal finance at Business Insider. And then I was like, yo, this is really important work. And then none of the people in my community, I felt were reading it. And I was like, no, I want more people to know about this and get more informed. And so I sort of started working on Queer and Trans Wealth on the side, and always had it as this is something I want to do in the future. And then for me, what happened was they laid off a big percentage of the workforce. And I was like, okay, I'm on the list. I guess it's time for me to do this thing that I've always been wanting to do. I myself had a specific plan of, let me stay here for X number of years, and then I'll bounce and do my own thing when I'm ready. But I think, as most people find, the universe doesn't always wait until you're fully ready to for you to do the things that you need to do. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, it makes me think of, I don't know if this is true or not, but like in Mandarin, crisis and opportunity are like the same symbols. Something like you were thrown into a crisis, your job was gone, and yet here was an opportunity that you had a chance to step into.
Yeah, totally. Oh, I didn't know that about Mandarin. That's so cool. Yeah.
It,
I'll look
it's
that up.
it's yeah, it's a lot about our attitude towards it. And that's so interesting. You started off as a journalist and you saw a need around personal finance. Can you tell me, like, what was it like to get started as a money coach with the background of journalism? What were those first few client sessions like?
I would say that the earliest sessions, I was like, oh, what a surprise. Like, we both needed this, like, not that I think I just came in with a lot of imposter syndrome. Like, no, I have skills in this one area and I'm about to like pivot into another thing. And so in my mind, I was like, oh no, I'm not qualified for this. Or am I tricking people into like working with me or something? And by the end of the session, like, I would realize like I had more to offer than I initially thought, and also like folks just seemed really refreshed by, yeah, the way that I approach things and the way that I see certain situations. So I would just say at the end of every of those early sessions, it was like a pleasant surprise. Like, oh wow, we're really moving in this direction. So yeah.
I love that. I love that. And it's so common, right? When we're starting off something new, like being like, can I do this? And yet if people are reaching out to you, it means that there is something that you have of value. I remember one of my first business coach would tell me, he was a white man in his 60s. He would tell
Mm,
me, like, you can work with people I can't work with, or that won't open up to me or won't relate to me. So it was really important for him to be able to mentor me and coach me, because he knew that I would be able to access, like, to serve people, right? And
yeah.
I feel like it's such an abundant mindset that we're both money coaches, like both you and I, but yet you bring a different skill set, a different point of view that is really needed by people who maybe would come to me and be like, okay, the technical skills are there, but the comfort isn't there. So I'm really glad that you moved through that imposter syndrome and are still here doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. And I will say too, so before like the whole layoff situation happened and I had to go do queer and trans well full time, like people were asking me a lot, like, hey, can you coach me through this? And I would be like, it would be like friends of mine. And I'd be like, let's just get on the phone. Like, I'm sure it isn't that hard. And, it wasn't like, it was fun and like kind of energizing for me to be doing it. And yet there was still this voice in my head, like, oh no, like you can't start doing this work until you have more experience, right? But like the only way you get more experience is to get started. So it was like a weird chicken and egg thing. And yeah, like, yeah, it's funny how it works.
So I'd love to pivot and ask about your financial background, right? Like, what was the financial background of your childhood, and how do you see that affect the work you do today, if at all?
Hmm. Yeah. So let me start from the beginning.
Yes, the more
um,
context, the better for highly sensitive
yeah,
people.
yeah. So I grew up, I was born and raised in the Philippines. And I will say on my mom's side, she really did not, her family did not have enough resources. Um, and the only way that they made it work is that my grandmother actually worked in the US and sent back like all of her earnings. And that's sort of how they made it through. However, on my dad's side, he comes from like, you know, businessmen, entrepreneurs, but like their earnings were very up and down. So, there might be one season where they're doing really well and they buy fancy cars, right? And then the next season where it's like the cars are being repossessed and like their stuff is outside, like, so it was kind of like a lot for him, right? And when my parents got together, something that became really clear for both of them, I think, is that they wanted financial stability, and they were both like super ambitious people. When I was a kid, my parents actually started their own business together. And, you know, I'm sure there were some difficult struggles there of like trying to make ends meet. But as a kid, like I was lucky that they didn't really let me see it as much. And I remember too in the Philippines, like we were in this apartment complex where um, the front of it had a couple of business like fronts, and my parents like rented out one of those spaces. So I would come home from school and I would go straight to their office, and they would be working like all hours, you know? Um, so that's sort of like early how I grew up. And then we moved to the States when I was 12, and things changed like a lot, you know? It was only my dad who was allowed to, like, who had the papers to work. And suddenly my mom, who, like, she worked my whole life, you know? So for her to be a stay at home parent was like, I was like, whoa, I don't know what's happening here. And I believe like I was going through some stuff in my family's garage once, and I found like one of my dad's tax returns, and he was making like 35K for like a family of five, you know? And um, also we moved here like in 2003. So it was right after 9/11 when like things around immigration really cracked down. Um, yeah. And the biggest thing I noticed is that my dad, who was like a respected entrepreneur in the Philippines, um, also, like, I will say he's a lot darker skinned than me. When he would go into the workplace, like, he would just get disrespected, you know, no promotion opportunities available. Like, his ideas would get shot down, you know, and it really, like, affected him because it was just such a huge drop, you know? So, those first couple of years were really hard with just one income instead of two. And I would say it wasn't until I was later in high school that both of my parents were able to work again. And so the finances were a little bit more stable. And, you know, I think, yeah, when as an adult, a lot of that, it's not, I hate to call it like instability because it's not something that my parents were in control of, you know what I mean? But just sort of the circumstances being up and down, not just within our lifetime, but just generationally. That's what happened, right? Like, I think that carried over to me where I always had this like feast or famine type of mentality around money. You know, like sometimes you're doing really well, and then other times you're eating, you know, spam and rice. You know what I mean? So, um, yeah, especially as a writer and someone who's, you know, more artistic, there's also a lot of messaging that's like, you can't, you know, you can't be financially well unless you like sell out. You know what I mean?
It's making me think of, I had an interview earlier with Pamela Capelat, who
Oh,
founded,
yeah.
yeah, she did French and Budget. She did Get Shameless with Money. And she talked about that artist part of it, right? Like the feast or famine, where if you are doing well as an artist, then you must have sold out. But then it's so stressful to not be financially stable. Like, how can you be creative if you're facing so much instability? So one thing I heard from this is that your parents, again, just because of the what it means to immigrate, what it means to face racism, there was a lot of instability financially, and that in your own life you ended up feeling comfortable with that. Is that something, how do you see it? How do you see yourself working with that, through that? Imagine you had you as a client, right?
Mm.
I do this exercise for myself too. I'm like, imagine I was my client and I was like, whatever it is that I'm doing
Yeah.
that's weird with money. What are some things that you would say to yourself?
I mean, first of all, I'd be like, yeah, chill the fuck out. Like, chill out, you know? Because I think that, you know, the product of all of this is like, I'll just be honest, like, I'm a little bit of a workaholic, right? And especially when you are the steward of a business and like the the stream of revenue depends on how much you show up like to me too. I'm like, okay, so let's go to work like 12 hours a day or something wild, you know what I mean? And so if I were my own client, I would be like, yeah, so I need you to have like set work hours and like better boundaries around that. And I probably would say like, yeah, I mean, one thing that I do and then I have done for a while is like, I'm a very regular saver, you know? And this is something I always say, like, the amount actually doesn't matter. It's about the habit, you know? So, yeah, that's probably what I would like tell myself if I were my own client.
Yeah, yeah. I think with money, there's so much of it that's really about identity. Like, I tell
Mm-hmm.
clients that if you can start saving $10 towards your 401k to get that employer
Totally.
match, you are a person that saves for retirement. So
Mm-hmm.
that
Period.
guilt, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like the amount will change, our things will change. And I feel both of my parents also are entrepreneurs and they also immigrated and they are also workaholics. So I have definitely struggled with that part of it. And it's, yeah, yeah. So I love that you
Yeah,
would suggest set hours.
totally. And, you know, I think for children of immigrants, especially, like, it's important to know, like, the things that worked for our parents' generation, like, it doesn't work for us now necessarily because the conditions are so different, you know, economically and like what my parents had access to, like, you know, the house they owned when we lived in St. Louis. Like, I was like, we can't get houses for like $189,000 anymore, like, you know, and so yeah, it's just different. It's something I talk about too when I coach my clients through setting different goals. Like, okay, like, is this realistic? As in, like, have people around you done this before? But also, like, which people, you know, because like if my parents are out here saying like, we came here with $200 in a shoestring and da da da, like, cool. I'm glad y'all are okay. And also that's not my circumstances now, so I can't be setting goals comparing myself to their situation back then, right?
I love how you're pointing out that those comparisons, we really need to contextualize them and see how is it helpful to compare, if at all.
Totally, totally. Hmm. Yeah, I would also add like for it's like layered comparisons, you know, because for queer and trans communities especially, like the comparison might be, okay, like we have some elders who lived through the AIDS epidemic in the, you know, 80s and 90s, and this was a time when, you know, folks were, yeah, like buying hormones under the table, or like um, there would be sex workers who like they would raise a bunch of money either for themselves or for community members to receive gender affirming surgery because it wasn't like covered anywhere, and they would have to pay like thousands of dollars out of pocket, right? But most notably, I would say there was no like government healthcare support for the folks who were like dying of HIV, right? So there were people, usually like lesbians, who would like just drop everything and be the ones to like take care of other community members. And, you know, when we think about like what folks, like how folks had to use their money to get through those things, it's the same sort of comparison, right? To like, oh yeah, my immigrant parents had like $200 when they came here, right? And it's the same kind of thing, like, oh right, like um, our trans ancestors had to, you know, really pull it together to support many people in the community. So why do I deserve to have, you know, $300 in my dining out budget? That's silly. You know what I mean? Like, I think folks really carry that with them. And yeah,
It's like, it's like survivor's guilt.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I know that Jean Marie Brown says it and that she got it from one of her elders. But the revolution needs to feel irresistible, right?
Hmm.
Like it needs to feel positive and joyful. And it's interesting how hard it can feel to be positive and joyful. I mean, that sense of underserving, like being undeserving of joy,
Yeah,
because so many before us didn't have access to it. And
totally.
thank you for bringing in the experience of the trans community. And I'd love to talk when, I mean, this podcast is for highly sensitive people who are focused on social justice, and your focus on the trans community is so much about social justice. And one of the previous episodes that I listened of yours, which is beautiful, Them Boys, I'm gonna link it to this. You talk about your name, how you picked Leo as your name, and that it also comes from your grandmother, Leonilda. I would love to know, I mean, introduce your grandmother, her story, but I would love to know, how do you think she would define social justice?
Yeah, first of all, shout out to Sean Aaron, who runs STEM Boys. It's like a really great organization, and Sean is a great person altogether. Yeah, so my grandmother, her name was Leonila. You know, she was a teacher in the Philippines, and then she came to the US. I would like to think she had always dreamed of doing it, you know. I don't think she dreamt of like leaving her 5 kids behind, you know what I mean? But like I would like to think too that she was more adventurous and was like, "Oh yeah, let me see what's going to happen." And you know, she worked a lot of like odd jobs here in the States, and then she would send the money back to her kids so that they could finish school and all that stuff. And yeah, she was just cool, you know. Back in, I would say, like the 80s and 90s, when she was living in Queens, New York. You know, there's all these stories of like there was this one woman who was, she said that she met my grandmother one day because she was on, like, this woman was on the train like sobbing, you know, and her situation was pretty bad. Like she was a Filipina woman who, with this family that she was like nannying for back in the Philippines, and they were like, "Hey, like, you know, we're gonna like come move with us, help us like raise our kids, and we're gonna like get you your papers and stuff." And they never did, and so she was kind of stuck in that position, and they were also, I think, like abusing her. So yeah, she was just having a tough time, and she was like sobbing on the train, like, "Oh my god, my life." And apparently my grandma just came up to her just out of like, "I see you're Filipino, I see you're crying," you know, and just started like chatting with her, like, I think about something random, like, "Where did you get your haircut?" or something, just to like get her mind off of it. And so they started talking, and over the course of this train ride, this like woman tells her like, "Oh, here's my situation, like it really sucks and I feel really trapped and I don't know what to do." By the end of the train ride, my grandma Leonila was like, "Okay, like, you're gonna come sleep on my couch and we're gonna figure out how to get you a different job. Like you're not going back there, you know." And I don't think that was the only situation like that, because she was always trying to help people find a different way to make money to like leave the situation that they were in if it was not good for them. And then this is the thing. I feel like the universe, like when you're like that, the universe just like is like, "Okay, I see you, and you're going to win the lottery today in some form," you know, because what ended up happening is that she got a job working for some like rich guy on Wall Street, like cleaning his house. And then he was like, "Hey, I bought this property in St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands, and I want you to take care of that property. Like, I might go there for vacation. I might like have guests there, but otherwise, like, you're just there alone, you know, like chilling." So like, this is, you know, probably like half of her life she spent basically like in a mansion overlooking the ocean, you know, like, which is like, come on now, you know, like that's incredible. So yeah, and she did some pretty amazing things in St. Thomas as well. Yeah, she like made friends over there with a doctor who, he was like, "I need someone to help me run like the business side of my practice." And she kind of made it so that his services were also accessible to the people who are like from there but can't necessarily like afford it, you know. Yeah, she was like super loved, and like I'm pretty sure the whole island came out for her funeral. You know what I mean?
It's like she didn't even think about how to define social justice. She just was.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think she was just one of those people that was like, I bet you if I asked her, like, okay, so you did some organizing work around like human trafficking and da. She's like, what are you talking about? Like, like she would be like, I was just doing the right thing in the moment. I don't think she really thought about it in the way that we like theorize about these terms, like I think she was just about it. So, yeah,
Yeah, it just sounds like see a need, fill a need, one by
totally.
one, changing the world.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
Well, bringing it back to you, and maybe you theorize about social justice a little bit more than Leonila does. How do you think about it? How do you think about it in your work? And I feel like your work is so much about it, but it's still, I'd love to hear it in your own words.
I think I have the same, I think I have a similar mentality because I get like, okay, so I live in LA and sometimes I'll be like at a play or something or at a party and people will be like, oh my God, you're the queer and trans wealth person on the internet. And I just feel weird because I'm like, what do you mean? Like, we're at a party right now. Like, my nipples are out. Like, what are you talking about? Like, like, and I don't, yeah, I also get the sense like I don't really feel the need to be like, wow, you're so amazing, like all the time,
I mean, think about it for the work. How would
for sure.
you more focused on that than like I totally get being
Yeah.
your humility, but also like why is this work important? If you're speaking up for the work of like as a money coach, as anyone, why is it important to integrate social justice into whatever your calling is or your work?
Yeah. I mean, I think I would say the importance of integrating social justice into your work, no matter like what you do, is just the connection you have with other human beings. And yeah, I think the most important thing about this, about social justice, is that like whatever we're going through, whatever hardships we're going through, like we're not the only ones going through that. And for me too, like a lot of the things that I've learned about trans rights and, immigrant rights and all that stuff, it's kind of helped me, like, first of all, not blame myself. And second, like, not blame my parents or like whoever it might be. Cause at the end of the day, there's like a bigger system at play that benefits off of us, like pitting ourselves against each other. So to me, it's almost like, when you're cooking something in the pressure cooker and you like release the thing and it like lets out all this steam. Like, to me, social justice is really about that.
Yeah, changing, looking at the structures that are creating all that pressure
Totally. Yeah.
and changing them.
Yeah.
One of the things that, as someone who's not part of the trans community, like I wasn't really aware of it until like maybe a decade ago when I first started having friends let me know that their pronouns were they, them. And it feels like it's been such a short amount of time where there's been so much change. But
Totally.
at the same time, I know that this has been here forever. Like Indigenous community had two spirit. Like there are so many ways that people and communities have been organized. So given that it's been such a short amount of time where it feels that trans has really come up into the spotlight and right now it's being really targeted in
Yeah.
unhelpful ways. So given that context of how much more into the spotlight it is since where it was 10 years ago, let's imagine like a beautiful world where things have been figured out in a way that really embraces social justice. Can you paint a picture of what that would look like for you?
Mm. What would it
And
look like if things are really working out?
mhm.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, first of all, access to housing, affordable housing for all of my trans siblings is really important. Right now, so there's a couple of things at play. Like there's either unemployment or underemployment because, it's really hard to be trans in the workplace, right? So that's one factor that's not letting us like access housing. And then on the other front, there's, in order to act like either rent an apartment or buy a home, you need to have your credit report like on lock. You know what I mean? So when you're going through a legal name change, this that whole like transferring your credit report becomes a huge issue that prevents people from getting approved for housing. So if I could like number one, please let's get us all housed, and also we're still in a time where like if folks like come out to their parents, they might get kicked out of the house, right? So like housing for all ages, youth to elders. The second thing, if everything were to work out, yeah, our access to healthcare is a big priority. Yeah, just making sure that we get the treatment that we need. And now, too, this administration is actually criminalizing doctors who provide healthcare to trans people, which is like wild to me. Like, I'm like, there's so many other things you criminalize, like why this? So, and also they're defunding hospitals that might provide trans affirming care, right? So I'm like, if I could just wave my magic wand and fix that problem, like, please, I know it's not going to happen that way, but yeah. And then, yeah, the third thing I would say is, yeah, either like jobs or stipends for people to be able to like create what kind of work they want to be in, right? Because I do notice a lot of trans people don't want to work in corporate settings, myself included, and it's easier for us to start our own business and, decide to go that way. But then, we're kind of put in this position where it's like we're one late invoice away from not being able to make rent, and I don't want that to be, I don't want us to be in that position also. But I feel like these are my top three things. And to zoom out a little bit, it's one of those things where if we find ways to support trans people in being well in these like three ways, overall, like this is something everyone could benefit from, So, yeah.
It reminds me of, I remember reading about the Americans and Disabilities Act, that initially they created those ramps for people in wheelchairs, but it benefited people who were using crutches. It benefited the elderly. It benefited
Mm-hmm.
women who were pregnant. It benefited so many people. So you're talking here about housing, healthcare, having stable income, good sources of paths to entrepreneurship. That would benefit everyone, everyone, everyone.
Definitely. Yeah.
And I appreciate you sharing about like the difficulties with credit, with your credit score if you have the legal name change. There's so many things that, because I don't particularly serve that community and I'm not part of the trans community, that I'm not aware of. But I love having you highlighted here for any financial advisors that may be listening, anyone who's in relationship with the trans community, or anyone who just wants to be a good ally. Anything else along those terms that you would want to share for listeners?
These are some of the things that trans people go through. But if I were to expand for the queer and trans community, our goals just look a little bit different, like, for example, or actually, maybe they don't. Who knows? But um, for example, like I've seen some, queer couples go into six figures worth of debt to go through like IVF or just the family planning process, right? Yeah, yeah. Retirement is a really tough thing to kind of like what I was saying earlier, right? Like, oh, if our elders who went through this thing, like they don't have retirement, like why do I deserve to have this, right? Very scary statistic that over a third of queer and trans elders retire in poverty. Yeah, and it's because, during our lifetime, we experience so much ongoing discrimination that we're not able to put in as much as someone would if they, were employed somewhere for 30 years and were able to continuously do, that 401k contribution, right? And yeah, me personally, I'm just a big proponent of like, let's prioritize retirement, because I don't want to see any more folks in that position. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's speaking to what you said earlier, it's like maybe it's not particular to the queer and trans community. Like that's all of us are facing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Going back to that wonderful interview you had on Them Boys, there was something there that you spoke about that really like that hit a nerve for me when you were saying that it was in your early 30s when you started to think about money long term. And I know that for the queer and trans community, often because of just how difficult it is to be in the world, sometimes thinking long term feels really impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I would love to hear like how did you start to notice that shift inside of you? How would you encourage others to have a more long-term view? I mean, also like what are the benefits of
Mm-hmm.
having a long-term view of not just thinking today's the only day forever?
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I'll say when I was in my 20s, I made so many financial mistakes. Like I feel like every single one in the book, you know what I mean? I also felt like a lot of my relationships at the time were pretty transactional and like not that deep, And yeah, I just was really going through it. And if I can share, I was pretty passively suicidal up until I was like 26, 27, something like that. And I think that all of my decisions around money were kind of in the shadow of what I was going through at the time, right? So I wasn't really thinking, maybe I should save for retirement because when I'm 65, I will, need more healthcare and I can't work anymore, right? At the time, I was just kind of thinking, I don't think I'm going to live that long. So YOLO, let's get oysters and champagne, no problem. And let's put it on a credit card. My treat for everybody. You know what I mean? So like, it wasn't like an, how do I say, it wasn't like on the forefront of my decision making, but it was always like an undertone of like, you're not going to live that long. So what's the point? And yeah, it wasn't until like, it's funny when you mentioned earlier, like, I know this has existed for a long time, but it's in the last like decade or so that more and more people started talking about it. I'm like, yeah, same kind of, because like for me too, I remember my freshman year of college, I had a professor who was talking about like trans stuff and pronouns. And I remembered raising my hand and being like, are people actually going to do this? Like, are you for real? Like, is this a thing? Because I was just like ignorant and frankly kind of an asshole, So I was like, are you serious? And then like fast forward many years later, like I am now one of these they them people that like I was questioning back in the day, So it's like I've had the awareness, and it wasn't until I was really like in community and allowing myself to be like vulnerable and connected to folks that I was like, oh wow, this is a thing. Like I've been suppressing this for a long time. And through that, and also like meeting trans people who got the chance to get older, I'm like, oh, right, this is a possibility model for me of what life could be like. And I think it just, like the kids say these days, it altered my brain chemistry, but it's real. Like I think it really gave me like, oh no, if I'm going to live really long. If I'm going to live to be as old as, Miss Major, for example, who's a trans activist who I believe she's like in her 60s. If I'm going to live that long, like I got to change the way I'm moving right now. So that was really the shift for me.
Yeah, seeing examples of people and thinking, oh, that could be me too.
Definitely.
And I think there needs to be, thank you for sharing your experience of like your first interaction with pronouns and then now growing into it for yourself. But I think there just needs to be like a level of safety within us to start to really wrestle with the internalized oppression.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know sometimes my mom will tell me things and I'm like, oh my God, mom, you are like touting oppression. But at the
Yeah,
same time, I know that she's trying to keep me safe. She's like hiding these parts of me, denying these parts of me, trying to change these parts of me has helped me survive. And I want you to survive. So that's why she gives them to me. And I get to say, well, actually, like I want to live a fuller life than what your mental constructs may be allowing you to live. Like, not to give like a backhanded criticism to my mom. I know that she loves me. But it's like we have to. I always love focusing on like what would it look like if it were positive, because it makes us really start to chink away at the things that are
totally.
negative right now, and it brings light. It's that contrast. If you bring a lot of light, you'll be able to see the edges of it so that we can start changing it. Well, Leo, it's been such a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah,
And I want to end, listeners won't be surprised that I want to end on a positive note because social justice, like you gotta have like find the play in this to keep it going. On your website, at the bottom of the page, I love how you highlight values. And I'm going to
mm-hmm.
read them out for listeners, but you have gender affirming, anti racist, abolitionist, transformative justice, economic justice, decolonial, anti capitalist, right sized accountability, writing as healing, compassion, empathy, equanimity, vulnerability, and pro ho. Which of these values feels most important today as we're recording
Mm.
this? Which one is
Mm.
calling you today?
Yeah, I would say right-sized accountability.
Lovely. Tell me more.
Yeah, what I mean by this is, I serve a lot of folks who will say things like, yeah, similar to what we said earlier, like, I don't deserve to have a little dining out part of my budget because what do you mean? Like, I come from, you know, people who have gone without for so long and all that stuff. To the same point, like sometimes people will say, I don't want to invest in retirement because I will be investing in the very things I'm protesting against, such as big oil, weapons, fossil fuels, And I think right size accountability is really important right now because this current administration has created so much chaos. And I feel like the way we see this is like, oh no, I really have to be stepping up and giving everything up so that I can, so that I can show up and fix this problem. And I think sometimes individuals might say, so I can fix this problem by myself. And that's just not realistic. You know what I mean? I think the truth is, especially with social justice movements, like we just, we have like one or two corners that we're really taking care of and we're responsible for like sweeping and mopping these little corners. And I think it's really important to get clear about what those corners are and be like, okay, I'm just going to focus on really doing my part here. And once I get used to it, I can like expand my capacity a little bit more, Yeah, I also see a lot of folks like wanting to engage with financial activism a lot more, but then it's like, let's do everything all at once, which is like, sorry, it doesn't work. Like, you really, it's just like a habit, just like anything else, right? Like, you really have to change it slowly instead of making some kind of drastic, like, okay, like suddenly I'm, you know, changing everything, every single habit right now, right? So, yeah.
I love that. So you spoke about community. You spoke about incremental change that like actually sticks to us and changes the identity of who we are, and right-sized accountability. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank
As
you. Thank you again for having me. This was such a
yeah,
pleasure.
yeah. When I saw you listed on like a member of the Rad Planners community and I learned more about your work, I felt so excited to be like, oh,
Oh,
I get to talk to him. I get to talk to them and hear their story and bring light to it. And again, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Thank you for sharing it
thank
here.
you.
I'll make sure to link in the show notes how people can find you. Oh, I learned that you have a fund for people who
Oh,
need. Yeah, tell us about that. You immediately knew what I was talking about. Please tell us.
yeah. So we have a thing called the Pay It Forward Fund. And the idea is that we pool a bunch of donations so that trans people who live in red states or states that they've either like passed or introduced anti-trans legislation, can access our services for free. So it's pretty cool if you I know times are tough right now, but if folks had anything to spare, even if it's like $10 to $20, it would be a big help towards providing services for folks. And at the same time, like, you are supporting like a trans practitioner. So like, I can support them and like not have to work for free, basically. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. And that comes back to like see a need, fill a need. If you have whatever extra we have, like give up a coffee and know that your money is going towards something that's both benefiting you as the person giving the support, but also the person receiving the support. And it also benefits the giver. That's the beautiful thing about giving. Like it also like it strengthens your community bond. So I will
Mhm.
definitely include that in the link. And once again, Leo, thanks for coming on the show. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Leo, for joining Highly Sensitive Money. What stayed with me most is Leo's vision of right-sized accountability. The idea that we don't have to take on everything to be part of meaningful change. We just need to know the corners we're meant to tend to and to do that with care. I'm also holding the image of Leo's grandmother, Leonila, quietly transforming lives through compassion and clear sight. That legacy of care feels like a thread that runs through Leo's work in this conversation, redefining wealth not as accumulation, but as connection, justice, and joy. By the end of this conversation, you might find yourself asking, what would it look like to treat your financial life not just as a checklist, but as a love letter to your past, to your people, and to your future? Thank you for joining me on Highly Sensitive Money. I'm Diana Giselle Yanez, and I hope this episode helped you see how money and sensitivity can work together while honoring our interconnected well-being. We have the power to create a system where everyone's needs are met because nature is abundant. If you found value in today's conversation, please take a moment to leave a review and share this episode with someone who could benefit. Your support helps this message reach more people navigating their own financial journeys. A thank you goes to Mike Schul for the music and Juan Antonio Nunez for producing. For more resources on bringing money and social justice together, sign up for my monthly newsletter over at allthecolors.net. I also invite you to schedule a free 30-minute call where we can talk about money coaching, investment management, and all things money and social justice. Until next time, remember that your sensitivity and deep thinking is your superpower.